Welcome in, cats and dogs. CProc, America's favorite bitch-ass white boy, flying solo. This flying solo previewing the playoffs, bringing in insider Greg. You may have seen him a few times, heard him a few times on past shows. And we're going to set the table a little bit for the playoff picture now that everything's set in stone and we know who's playing who. Greg, I want to start off with this. As we know, going down the stretch, the playoff picture was constantly changing. Like it got to the point where you almost didn't want to bother watching for a week because you knew in 5 games time everything would be upside down anyway. How did this playoff jockeying down the stretch? I want to talk about who may have helped themselves, hurt themselves. Charlotte 3 days ago, when Jet and I did our last episode, was set off to face Boston. And I don't think they were particularly in a bad place playing Boston, but now they're going up against Indiana, who's really been on low fumes in the second half. Did Charlotte help themselves going into this play-in tournament, setting up against the Pacers versus the Celtics?
Well, I think my take on Charlotte would be, I guess my biggest concern would be, like, however you want to draw it up, they lost 5 in a row to end the season. And they weren't in a comfortable playoff spot to begin with. So the point is, these games did matter a lot to them. So I'm not sure, regardless of who they played, I can't imagine they wanted to go in on a 5-game losing streak. So, I mean, regardless, right? I mean, I would think if you're playing good ball going in, you'd feel confident against anyone. 5 losses in games you need, I think that's trouble either way. So I don't know if the matchup per se, but 5-game losing streak to end the season, not looking promising for them. I don't think they wanted that.
All right, so flip that a little bit from Boston's perspective. Are they kind of, whereas before a couple of days ago they were feeling pretty confident playing a Charlotte team that's pretty cold right now, and now they're like pooping their pants a little bit with red hot Russell Westbrook coming into town?
Yeah, I would think that they won't say that publicly. Oh, they usually take the party line teams. Oh, it doesn't matter who we play. I think that's complete BS here. There's no way you can tell me they're looking forward to facing Westbrook, red hot Westbrook, and Washington coming to play them. And the other factor too is Boston has been leaking significantly on the defensive end. Well, you're facing a team now who's they're scoring 130 plus a night. I think for them, although they were somewhat firmly entrenched as the 7, the way the rest of those games worked out, that did not work in Boston's favor. No, not at all.
Now, the other example of this jockeying thing from the West, at least in terms of the play-in tournament coming up Tuesday, this didn't really change from a couple days ago, but it still had a little bit of factor on the last day of the season. Memphis was playing Golden State, and probably nobody was really expecting Memphis to beat Golden State anyway, especially how hot they've been. But is Memphis also kind of wiping some sweat from their brow that they don't have to go up against the Lakers and they can play San Antonio and they kind of get that another kind of free win to get into the 8th spot?
See, I think that's a question mark, because if I'm Memphis, I mean, there's not really I guess I'd probably rather play Golden State, though, than the Lakers. So assuming, if we want to take Memphis, that they do beat San Antonio, I'm assuming, that's not a good matchup either way. So it's like kind of pick your poison here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, okay, you have a good shot to win that game against San Antonio, but then who would you rather face? And I don't know the answer. I can't imagine it would be the Lakers. I know obviously the Lakers, their injury troubles and all that is well documented, but to their credit, the Lakers defensively actually have, if you kind of look at the metrics, they've actually played very well defensively, even with those guys out. So I don't think it's a good scenario either way for Memphis. Let's put it that way.
And staying on the topic of the Lakers and Warriors, in terms of this jockeying, are you better to lose or you better to win? Outside of playing 1 game versus playing 2 games, if you're the Lakers and Warriors, are you better off winning this game on Wednesday and vaulting right to play Phoenix? Are you better off kind of taking a little bit of a step back, not quote unquote mail it in, but kind of mail it in, and then take your chances playing Memphis and then go up against Utah?
Well, I think just from the nature of the dynamics of how they set up the tournament, obviously winning, and I think especially the Lakers is a huge deal because you kind of need rest. All these guys have been coming off injuries. So I think from that perspective, winning that game is very important. If I can twist that a bit, I think the bigger impact is like, forget what the Lakers and Golden State wants. What does Phoenix and Utah want? And I can't imagine any way, like if you're Utah, that you want the Lakers to fall into that 8th seed. There's no way. I mean, Golden State, Curry's been incredible, but you'd much rather face Golden State. So I actually think it's more of a concern for those guys. Like, how do we avoid the Lakers? No one wants to see that matchup, and especially that's your reward for the 1 seed. So think about it. So in a rare instance, I'm going to guess most teams, most fans, all of us, if you're not a Laker fan, you root against them. I think like Utah is going to be rooting for the Lakers to win because you can't tell me they want to face the Lakers in the 1-8 matchup. No way.
No, that's a weird Pandora's box to be knocking on.
No way. There's no chance.
Do you think in that scenario, what are the odds the Lakers can wind up in that spot and force a legitimate upset alert? Is Utah just that good this year that it doesn't matter, or are they really going to be scared and the Lakers could pull some 1-8 magic?
Yeah, of course, yeah. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And I mean, even assuming that Donovan Mitchell comes back and he is healthy, which is we can't be sure of that. Even if he was healthy, but especially with that, I mean, there's no way. I mean, the Lakers are the defending champions, and they have 2 of the best players in the world. I can't imagine how that would be. And not only that, the Lakers are actually good defensively. So that they actually make life difficult aside from their talent level. Their defensive intensity has been impressive lately. So that's but the funny thing is, would we forget the seeding? I don't even really is it really that big an upset if the 8th seed wins in this case, right? Like it's kind of an odd scenario.
8th seed is the champs, yes.
And everyone knows that the sole reason they're the 8th seed, I'm not saying they definitely would have been the 1 seed if healthy, but there's no way they would have been the 8th seed playing the playing game if Davis and LeBron. No, we all know that. They know that more than anybody.
Right.
So that's not a reward. So I getting back quickly, I can't. You have to be, if you're Utah or Phoenix, you don't want to play the Lakers. There's no way. No way.
Very, very much an epitome of the old cliche. When the playoffs start, everyone's 0-0.
Yeah. And it's just odd, though. Like, even though we touched on earlier, the West has been very strong. Like, as strong as the West has been compared to the East over the years, I don't recall in recent memory a team like the Lakers being the 8th seed. Like, that's it's a unique scenario and a unique year. But no, that's trouble.
And we try to stay away from the non-basketball extracurricular stuff on the show, but with all the ratings trouble the league has had in the last year, it is this Lakers Golden State matchup on Wednesday night. Is this like the league's kind of salivating at like a little bit of a comeback? Like, here's the playoffs aren't even started yet, and here's LeBron versus Steph Curry in a primetime setting.
I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, obviously it's new. I can't imagine for a 1 game from a purely an entertainment value. I don't know how you're getting better than that. I mean, it's 2 rivals, California, LA market, LA, Oakland, San Francisco. I would think that's a dream matchup for a 1 game. It's perfect. Like, yeah, I think if you're the NBA, you're like, oh, we'll take this one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and that's not even if they weren't as good as they are, it's still the Lakers. It's Steph Curry. So I mean, I think if you want to call it they hit the jackpot with that one, they lucked out there, no doubt.
Yeah, and being that, granted, the loser does have a chance for redemption playing the second game of the play-in tournament, but in still kind of a 1 game winner take all, do or die to advance in and be safe. I know this is a hard question for anyone to answer. Who do you like in that scenario? Do you like Steph being as hot as he is, or do you like LeBron just being the do everything world beater?
If I put my bias aside, I root for Steph. I think what the run he's been on has been incredible lately. I can't say I'd pick them over the Lakers though. I can't. If LeBron is and AD are anything close to 100%, they're still the Lakers. And I mean, if you go man for man across that roster, they're a much better team than Golden State. If those guys were not hurt, I've got to think the Lakers are probably a dozen games or higher better in the standings than Golden State. So I rooting wise, I want Steph and Golden State, but I would think the Lakers take care of business.
So to tie it all together, then you're saying maybe Utah doesn't have to wipe any sweat from their brow, and Phoenix is going to get them. And
that's what I think, and it's just funny either way. I mean, I can't imagine Phoenix like in Utah. Again, it's not what you're going to hear. The coaches, their best players. Oh, it doesn't matter the opponent. No way that's true. There is no chance you're looking forward to a first round matchup with the Lakers. And think of it this way. Even if these teams, like you get the Lakers in the first round, most first rounds, the 1 seed sweeps, wins in 5. This is nowhere near. So even if you win that series, you are coming out exactly. You're coming out bruised, beaten, mentally, emotionally exhausted. That's not a recipe for a successful run. Not at all. Yeah, and again, I think the Lakers' injury questions going forward are obviously a question, but for one series, you don't want to play them. No way, no chance.
Stay with us, kids. We're going to come back with Greg and talk a little East-West storylines, Hoops Boys podcast. Kick it with us. Welcome back, kids. We're going to talk a little East-West storylines right now, spin it around a bit. One of the, well, I don't even know if it's one of, it might be undisputed, the hottest player in the second half was Russell Westbrook, the new king of the triple-double. And they not only did they finish hot in general, they played themselves now into that 7-8 line going up against Boston. Is there any chance the Celtics are going to slow him down, or is Westbrook just destined to blow by them, line up against Brooklyn, and then at that point, what are the realistic chances the Wizards have on the back of Westbrook to give Brooklyn a run for their money?
Well, I don't necessarily think Boston. I don't think really anybody at this point is really slowing Westbrook down. I think the key to Washington in their defense is a sieve still. So you're going to need Tatum to put 40 plus. You're going to need them to operate a very high level offensively to beat Washington. I think Washington going forward, I mean, I think they have a ceiling because they don't play any defense at all. They give up way too many points. And you can't count on Russ as much as it seems like he does every single night to put up. You just can't. So where I think they will make things difficult, and no one is going to look at them across the slate and say, oh, this is a great matchup. They'll make it difficult, but I can't imagine. I mean, they give up way too many points. So I think for a long, elongated run, I don't see that. But I think they make for a more interesting, entertaining first round than a usual 1-8 matchup, especially in the East. So I don't think they would advance past that, but they'll make it interesting, and you'll see it will be good for TV. It'll be a lot of points and interesting games.
Now, a team that came out a little out of nowhere last year and went all the way to the finals of the Miami Heat. And they are slated right now in the 6th spot. They had a little bit of a stumble in the last couple of games. They beat the Pistons today, but who doesn't beat the Pistons? Is Miami this hard to be a dark horse when you just won the conference the previous year? But is Miami this scary low seed for Milwaukee and in theory Brooklyn advancing? Is Miami really this scary option on the horizon?
Absolutely has to be. I do think there's also pedigree. You go off last season, they're the team you don't want to face them anyway. You're going to come out battered and bruised. Even if you got through them, that's not an easy matchup. I mean, Bam is a complete difference maker defensively. Jimmy Butler has proven clutch player. They have a lot of pieces on that team. Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, as good as the top of the East is, I can't say I'm shocked if Miami went to the finals again. I'm not saying I'd pick that, but absolutely that Milwaukee, there's no chance Milwaukee was hoping Miami got the 6th seed. I can't imagine that. I'm sure they much would have rather faced New York or Atlanta than Miami. So yes, I think they're definitely a legitimate factor. I do.
Speaking of the Knicks, Jen and I are both diehard Knicks fans. You are also a Knicks fan. Outside of the absolute elation that not only are we ahead of schedule, but just the fact that we're in the playoffs, what are our chances? Are we gonna get by Atlanta, or are we gonna, given that Philly is a physical team like us, do we stand a better chance against Philly than we did against Brooklyn? Like, well, what's the Knicks playoff forecast?
Well, I mean, just touching on what you said, first of all, it's ecstatic as a fan that not only I remember looking before the year, and you're trying to say best case scenario. Oh, they have this play-in tournament now. Could we, if things break right, maybe make that 9th or 10th? It was somewhat of a possibility. The fact that they got the 4 seed and they'll have home court in a round of the playoffs and actually have a chance against Atlanta, I mean, you can't ask for better than that. So, I mean, I think that Atlanta Knicks series will be a good one. I think they do have a chance, but I don't think I think this is one of those where let's just enjoy this. I don't think offensively they're limited, and I think you saw the end of the Laker game last week. And again, the Knicks, I mean, good for them. They played excellent defense all year, but I think that kind of summed up where their ceiling lies. They go through stretches where they're not good offensively. So I can't expect over a 7-game series. If you had a shorter series, yes, I can't expect over 7 games to beat Philly. I don't see that. But on the same token, I don't think they'll get wiped off the court. I think they take a game, maybe 2, because they play defense and they bring it every night. So I think, take it for what it's worth. It's been a great run. It could go another round, and that would be wonderful. But I don't see them, like whereas Miami we just touched on, I don't see it going further than that. But what more could you ask for out of them? It's been a remarkable turnaround. Randall has been a borderline MVP candidate. So yeah, I mean they'll make it interesting, but enjoy the ride. It probably doesn't last too long.
If everything did break right and we got by Atlanta, what do you think about the matchup with the prospective matchup, I should say, because they had their hands full with Westbrook in all likelihood. What do you think about the prospective matchup with Philadelphia being a more physical team? Are we just going to get scraped, or do you think we could actually make life difficult for them, even if we don't win?
Okay, make life difficult, not an enjoyable cakewalk for Philly. Don't think Philly's ever in danger of losing the series, if that makes sense. So I don't think this is a 4-game sweep. Philly wins by 20 every. No, I don't. I think the Knicks will put up a legit fight. I don't think they'll ever have a chance to win the series, and I don't think they push Philly to the brink. Put it that way, but not a cakewalk on the same token.
Flipping gears to the West Coast, outside of the obvious behemoths that Utah has been all year and the one that Phoenix eventually turned into, you got Portland. Granted, like we say with Washington, Portland doesn't play a lick of defense either. Denver, even without Murray, Jokic has still kept them well head and shoulders above a lot of people. The Clippers are this kind of sleeping giant. I almost feel like is there a wide open nature to the West? As we spoke in the previous segment about the potential nightmare of facing Steph Curry or LeBron James in the opening round. is the West really blown out of proportion? I didn't even mention Luka Doncic. Like, is this really just a wide open spread of, we don't know who's going to be standing at the end of this? They're just going to beat each other up, and it could be any one of these 8-10 teams.
I think the Lakers are the whole key to this. The fact that they're the 7 or the 8 seed either way, that changes everything. So because of that, like we said, is it really even whatever the series odds were in Vegas or whatever? Is anyone really surprised if if the Lakers knock out Phoenix or Utah? So what year do you ever remember where you're looking at a legit possibility, not this long shot, that the 1 seed's out right away? So because the Lakers are seated there, it kind of is wide open, because once again, we very well could look at the second round and the first seed is out. The first and second seed is out. And in the NBA, you are reseeded. It's not, you're not reseeded. You're stuck playing I'm forgetting myself with the hockey playoffs going on.
Believe me, I kind of wish the NBA did do what hockey did in reseed.
Sorry, been a busy sports day. No, but you get the point, because the Lakers they're this anomaly. Like, you don't ever see a 7 or 8 seed like this. It has to be wide open because the top seed may be out by the second round. So yeah, I mean, I definitely think it is completely wide open for that reason.
Do you think, let's say the Lakers really did, can't really say shock the world, but no. let's say the Lakers really did get in, pull the upset, knock off Utah or Phoenix. Depending on where they were, 7 or 8, do you think it gives a better shot for LeBron or co to be seated as 7 coming in against Denver, Portland, or as 8 coming in against Utah and that whoever comes out of the Clippers Mavericks rematch?
I don't mean to be evasive on this. I hate to say it doesn't matter, but I think with them it's really, what are they? And what I mean by that is, are they healthy? Have they had enough time in that first round to kind of gel again, to have a little cohesion, to fit these parts back together? So I think for them, because of their elite talent level, it's upon them. Because if they were healthy, and I'm not assuming that is the case. I mean, if you think about it, LeBron and AD have missed significant time all year. Why we'd assume they just stay healthy for the next 28 games of a championship run, I don't. But I really think for them, it's just that it's pure health for them. Are they healthy? If they are, I don't think it really matters. Personally, if I had to choose, I would think they'd rather play Phoenix. But again, it's are they clicking on all cylinders for me? That's the issue. Because if they're not, I think they'll lose to either one of those teams.
Flip the nail on its head then. Of that remaining group, that 3 through 6 group, Denver, the Clippers, Dallas, and Portland, of that group, who out of there do you think would be most confident from their perspective going up against a healthy LeBron, healthy Davis?
I'd have to go the Clippers. So something interesting. We were talking about Denver, who's at the 3. This is something underrated for me. So you mentioned Jamal Murray being out. Monte Morris, who was their backup point guard, like, Monte Morris was a difference maker for them. Played 20 minutes. I'd put him on the top of backup point guards in the entire league. That's further depth that's eroded. And in the playoffs, the defensive intensity. So I think the depth issues, if they were healthy, they would be right up there. Because of that, I'm not buying that. I think the Clippers have to be one of the favorites here. I actually, in a rare case, I honestly think the bitter defeat from last year, I think that kind of gives them a little motivation. I think they've been sitting and waiting, and something you allude to it. I don't necessarily believe in turning the switch on and off, but they've been waiting for this. They're ready. They want this. Paul George seemed to have turned it up a level the second half of the season. I would actually think them. I mean, they have depth. They have 2 superstars. I think that's the team that's probably who I would pick to win out of the West. I think they've been waiting this for a long time.
And all right, I'll put you on the clock right now. Is especially since you just sung up the Clippers' praises. Who's coming out of the East? Who's coming out of the West?
As I just alluded to, I'm going to go with the Clippers, and in most cases, I'm going to go with the Clippers. I will take LA. I think that's awful for Dallas to be 5 and get them in the first. That's terrible for them. The East is tricky. I mean, as we've spoken off air about, is Kyrie mentally there? Are they healthy? Is Harden? The playoffs can be a long run. So do they hold up over that 4? I'm more torn on the East because obviously the Nets' firepower, if everything's in place, is second to none easily. You know what? I'm going to go with Philly. I know it's like easy and they're the 1 seed. I don't necessarily even think they're the favorite in a series with the Nets, but I don't know. I kind of felt like Embiid took his game to another level this year. I trust them more defensively. I mean, as we know, the Nets, they're relying on offense. So if those guys misfire one night, I feel like I have more an idea of what Philly's going to bring every night. I'm going to go with Philly. I'll go with Philly and the Clippers.
Embiid was at one point earlier this season was my MVP frontrunner, and then injuries kind of took him off to the side. Do you think?
And I don't think they're like, I don't understand. I don't think they're an absolute complete juggernaut, but I do in this case, like they're going to play defense. I know it. I know what they'll bring. They can overcome stretches because they're not nearly as proficient offensively as the Nets. But in the playoff, I feel like they've had some early outs, a little experience similar to the Clippers. I think that's going to bode well for them.
So that defensive proficiency will make up for
their
lack of offense.
And I feel like
lack of offense. They average 113 a game.
Yeah, I think they can overcome a bad offensive night, whereas some of these other teams may not. And I do think, as we just talked about with the Knicks Hawks, avoiding the heat, like that is a significant difference. Like if you're Philly getting the Knicks or Atlanta in that potential second round matchup, as opposed to Brooklyn and Milwaukee if they go head to head. So just the path there, I think, is significantly easier for Philly. That is a factor in my head because if you literally may be looking at Miami, yeah, I think the path is a factor here. The 1 seed was far more important in the East than it was in the West.
And not to completely write off Milwaukee and their 2-time MVP, but do you think playing off that being a factor, avoiding that second round against Miami or the Nets, do you think they really will beat the living daylights out of each other to the point where they get to whoever does get to the conference finals, Philly is going to be in pretty prime position?
Yeah, that has to be a factor. I mean, in just pure, the NBA, the grind of a season. I think something that is underrepresented, and this is unique, is don't forget how many games they condensed into such a smaller window this year of days. I think injuries, even more so than usual, are going to be a real factor here. So, yeah, I mean, there's no way I can't imagine Milwaukee has a quick run in the first half, even if they win. It will be a grinding, bruising series. Yeah, I think that is an extremely relevant factor going forward. And that's why I think, like I said, I think Philly will close out their series earlier. Yeah, that's a tough road. And that's, for me, I think that's a gauntlet being in that 2-3 spot for the Nets as well and the Bucks. I do think it's a big factor.
It's often could be the low-hanging fruit, but that is a good point about the injuries because we see Donovan Mitchell having injuries lately, and the Nets situation bouncing back and forth, and the Jamal Murray being out.
Yeah,
so
it's something too. What we were touching earlier, that I don't recall in recent memory. Like I felt like a lot of teams this year, and I get it. When we were talking about positioning earlier in the bracket, I don't feel like teams went as hard at it down the stretch to secure a place like, to get the third or the fourth seed. I think because of that, because I think most teams, rightfully so, are saying, you know what, we have to be healthy. That's our main priority. Forget where we're seated. If we're in the playoffs, we're healthy. That's our best shot. And I think it's interesting because I think more so than not, we saw teams take that approach. Just get in healthy. That's our number one priority.
Particularly so in the West case, if you got a tough draw no matter what.
Yeah, like you saw most of those top seeds tonight. A lot of them, other than the Lakers, because the Lakers, it was a more relevant game, and I know they're 7, but a lot of these top seeds bench guys and got blasted by, and that's what I mean. I think they just decided, and I don't disagree. The most important part is doesn't matter who we play. We have to be healthy.
Especially for teams like the Brooklyn who was playing Cleveland, that doesn't require much of an effort. Milwaukee didn't have anything to play for.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do think, and like, you've heard grumblings. Again, it's a unique situation. You've heard grumblings amongst the Players Association. I don't think they're really happy about how many games they had to play and all this. And again, it was a unique situation, but I think more so than ever, the grind of this season is kind of worse than usual. So.
All right, that's an interesting follow-up, because before we toss the break, what is your sense? Because obviously LeBron's squawked about it, Luka was squawking about it early in the season. What is your take on the league's advent of this play-in tournament, the fans' advent? It's like, is this something that we look at it as fans, we're like, oh, this looks like a great couple of games of like these random matchups that we wouldn't have got to see. Is this something that can really go forward, or is the Players Association just going to shut it down and let this moment of like this, oh, this is such a fun thing, it's just going to die off, we're never going to see it again?
If I had to guess, I think it will stick. Number one reason, obviously, from the league's perspective, you're talking ratings, you're talking money. Like you alluded to earlier, you had it fall into your lap, a Lakers Golden State playoff game. That's amazing. And I think on the back end, even we're talking the lower depths of the Charlotte, Indiana. No, everybody knows they're not making a title run, but does it keep those markets interested down the stretch? Yeah, because they have a shot to at least play in it and at least have a puncher's chance. Whereas if you don't have those two spots, those markets have been not paying attention for basketball for a month now. So as we know, and I don't disagree here, the almighty dollar rules. The league is in business. It's a business. I do think it will stay. And I think it's a little sour grapes, just touching on LeBron. If people have seen the media last year, when he's firmly in the top of the seeding, it's like, oh, I think it's a great idea. And then this year he thinks it's the biblical equivalent of hell. It's like, LeBron, any of you guys, like, you still, if you're in that 7-8 spot, no less, you have to win one game. That's it. If you're not good enough to win that one game, you didn't get screwed over by the NBA. You weren't good enough to win the title, because in the 7-8 spot, right, it's not just a one game. Even if you lose, you still just have to win one game playing the winner of the 9-10. So just my take, I think it is good for the league, and I think it's sour grapes on the guys. Like, if you're good enough, you can beat Charlotte, you can beat Indiana, you can beat Memphis. Exactly.
Come back, kids. Next up, we're gonna give Greg the mic and let him opine on a couple playoff topics. Who's Plays podcast. Come right back. Welcome back. Before we wrap the show, we're going to have Greg take the mic and put on his Nostradamus cap for you kids. Gregors, what is your most tantalizing second round matchup on the horizon for what the East could present, and then what the West could present?
So I think for the East, it would be a superpower matchup. And again, we've acknowledged, preface that with Milwaukee, Miami that's a barn burner of a series to start, regardless of who gets out. I mean, but I think the better second round, let's say Milwaukee did advance, Milwaukee and Brooklyn, that's a heavyweight battle there. They just had an amazing few games towards the end of the season. Giannis got the best of them. That I think would be must-see TV. And I mean, I think Brooklyn, with all their firepower, would prevail if healthy and mentally with Kyrie on board. But nonetheless, like, that's a great series. And I think I think all of us are wanting and hoping Giannis to take that next level. And what better opportunity to the team in New York to go and upset who everyone kind of thinks is the favorite, if all healthy, the Nets. So I think that would be awesome. I think that would be a great matchup to watch.
The Giannis's long-awaited coronation with these MVPs. And
yeah, because I think even let's say even it came up short. If they even came up short in the conference finals, that's the big win that he hasn't had. So everyone's going to look at Brooklyn. If he took down Brooklyn and had an amazing series, that's the news of the NBA right then. That's a big time accomplishment, right? So I think that's a rare case where, yeah, they'd be disappointed if they win that series and don't go to the finals, but it wouldn't be a lost season because you took down Muhammad Ali there if they did.
As much a David and Goliath matchup as if David had two MVP awards.
Yeah. So I think that would be awesome. As much as I think the Heat may beat Milwaukee and has a good chance for the second round purpose, Brooklyn, Milwaukee, that would be must watch.
Now, with all a lot of, if not all, the assumptions we have to make with the West, what's a kind of sexy, glitzy glamour, tantalizing second round matchup coming out of the Western Conference?
Well, I think to start, I'm under the assumption the Clippers are primed for a run. On paper, they're facing Luka and Dallas in the first round. Who I'm not very high on Dallas this year, so I mean, Luka, don't dispute for a second how valuable he is. I don't think the supporting cast is good enough to make a long run. So assuming the Clippers get through to that, here's where we get back to. If the Lakers are that 8th seed and the Lakers go ahead and beat number 1, well, guess what? You have the Battle of LA of two teams who despise each other, share the same home with the Clippers and Lakers, and that would be fantastic. So, I mean, I as much as whatever I'm rooting for, I would love to see that. And I think most of NBA fans, that would be awesome.
And very much, and again, also another point on that, something that we were cheated out of last year. They were the top 2 seeds. Thought they were destined to see them play last year for the conference final, and Clippers kind of disappointed us. So now it's kind of like the comeuppance of getting that matchup now.
No doubt. And I think whereas in other years, I mean, whatever teams say publicly, you of course want to usually get the easier route. I mean, it makes sense. I actually think the Clippers here, they want nothing more than to get the Lakers. Like, they want to go through them. It's human nature. You have to. They want to beat them. They want it to be their city. So yeah, I think this is for them. They actually are wanting this matchup. They may be the one team that actually does want the Lakers. And honestly, they
don't match up terribly.
No, and there's somewhat of a, I don't say familiarity, but they've battled with them. They share the court. They know who they are. There's no secrets in that matchup. And what better way if the Clippers to overcome last year's bitter disappointment than to take down the champs. I'm sure they want that.
Especially the Clippers as a whole, obviously the redemption, but Paul George needs that redemption as well. And of course, Kawhi's battle tested time over.
Yeah, and I definitely think Paul George in particular, like, he took a lot of heat. He didn't have a great series when they got upset last year. I definitely do think that, and even Kawhi, as much as obviously he's won multiple titles, multiple teams, I think that was a bitter disappointment for him too, though. I mean, that was not expected the way they went out last year. They were pretty much embarrassed in their loss. It wasn't. I mean, they blew leads. It was just not a pretty performance. So they definitely have an axe to grind coming in here, and the talent is no doubt there. They're deep. They have superstars. I think that's a matchup myself and most people would want to see.
Before we transition real quick, let's say you're high on the Clippers. Let's say they do get there, and let's say they do win. And Kawhi has his 3rd title with a 3rd different team, maybe even a Finals MVP. with a third different team. Is Kawhi has this cemented legacy as the greatest postseason performer for bringing the title to 3 different towns?
I don't know if I'd put the greatest. I mean, again, we're even in our. I mean, you still.
I know it's hard to stack up against Jordan.
Yeah, I mean, that argument to me.
Kobe,
But I will
Shaq.
say, I will say this: what he does offer you, it's a unique accomplishment that no one else will have accomplished. I mean, to win with a couple of teams, period, to do it with 3, that's a pretty darn impressive accomplishment. That's not easy to go in, and I think that would be a testament to like what type of player he is. He is an overall excellent ball player who, both ends of the floor, he can mesh seamlessly with different groups. He's a great basketball player. He's not a numbers guy. He's not so I think for him, in a unique way, it would be his legacy. Of course, as good as he is, I mean, again, it starts and ends for me with Michael Jordan. But again, that's something unique that no one else will have been able to put on their mantle. And I'm sure that does mean something to him.
Now, another assumption we make as we're forecasting this is if the Lakers are the 8, that means they had to have lost to the Golden State Warriors. And there's a player that you're very high on, that a lot of people are very high on, that's getting some late MVP buzz. Is Stephen Curry? What's your take on? You want to shine a light? Take your moment to just gush on Steph for a few minutes, and what's his value to this playoff? What can he accomplish? What's the ceiling for Steph, especially with the type of season he's had?
He's been incredible, and nothing short of that. I mean, as I alluded to earlier, speaking off air, they were 15-5 in the last 20 games, the best record in the NBA of the last 20 games. They are nowhere near anything close to that without Steph. I mean, he just put up an epic run with all his 3-pointers. He's now, I believe, tied the record. He's the oldest guy to lead the league in scoring. Him and Jordan, I believe he's 33. An epic run. And why like I said, why I think it's even more impressive. There's no Durant, there's no Klay Thompson, and I legit think if he wasn't on that team, they may not win 15 games on the year. Like that's how. Yes, Draymond is a very good all-around player, but they'd have no offense whatsoever. So you in a weird kind of way, like I actually can make an argument this might have been his best year ever because he did so much with so little. So you have to. Now I don't think going forward. Here's the thing. Do I think the Lakers in that matchup? Do I think the Lakers are a better overall team than Golden State? No doubt about it. But when you have a guy who's hitting 10 3-pointers a game in a one-game scenario, I absolutely could see Golden State beating the Lakers in one game. Again, I wouldn't pick them in the series to beat them, but that's not what the 7-8 play-in is, to knock the Lakers down the 8. I don't want to fully discount it, but I don't think beyond that I mean, if you go roster to roster, Golden State to Utah to Phoenix, I'm not going to say they can't pull off an upset because he's just been that remarkable. But even if they did, I don't think a prolonged run is in the cards. It's Steph and everyone else. Yeah, he doesn't have, and Draymond, as we all know, Draymond is a borderline superstar in his own right, but he's more defensive rebound, which is important. But if Steph's not scoring 40, they can't make that run. So I think let's enjoy this. I'm going to root for him, and I hope they go as far as they can. He's had an amazing season, and quite frankly, it's rare that you say that for them to be the 7-8 seed. I think is amazing. Consider what they've lost. So kudos to him. Let's enjoy the run, and probably doesn't go beyond that first round, but so be it. Awesome run.
How much MVP love do you think he does get whenever the voting is tallied?
That's tough to say, and I think I think there's a bias against former MVP. I don't want to say a bias, but we already voted for that guy. It's like the old argument
twice.
Exactly. So it's not like the new and shiny thing. So MVP to a degree is somewhat of a popularity contest. I get the feeling he's not going to win. I could easily vote for him. He probably would be my choice, but I don't think he will win because of that. You get what I'm saying? It's
right.
been there, done that, and it's not fair. But I don't think he will win. But no one could tell me that he doesn't deserve it. Put it that way. He's been amazing, absolutely amazing.
Now you put yourself on record. Clippers, Philly. Are you taking the Clippers at the end of the day? Is Kawhi going to lift that trophy, or is the Embiid Simmons thing going to bring a Philly outside of the Eagles Super Bowl, the off maligned championship city? Is there another trophy in the city of brotherly love's future, or is it Kawhi's turn again?
I know I'm getting a little risky here, because they really came up short last year. I'm going to take the Clippers. I think they are well balanced. I think they've been waiting for this. And the severe disappointment last year. Way too talented for the way they went out. I think Philly, if I just look at that matchup, I still question with Philly their offensive proficiency late in games. It's well established, as great as Simmons is, not a shooting threat, where I think the Clippers just offer more ways to beat you. So for that reason, if that matchup does come into play, and again, I think the Clippers have a harder road to get there, but I'm going to go on the limb and hopefully not get burned twice. And I would take the Clippers in that matchup. I would. Yeah. I think the West on a whole is a better conference. The Nets are the wild card. If the Nets wound up in the East, man for man, if at their best, obviously they have as much firepower, but I'm not counting on that. So we'll go with Philly and the Clippers, and Clippers to take it down.
But what's the legit shot for Miami to repeat? Is Miami just going to run into that Philly wall, or does Miami have a real shot to take the East?
I mean, I can't say that just because that road is brutal. Like for Miami, if they have to, first of all, they have to beat Milwaukee, which is a monumental task, which they can do. They did it last year. But then they're looking at Brooklyn right after that. So, I mean, picture this. You beat Milwaukee, you then get Brooklyn, and now Philly's waiting for us. I don't think anyone would be able to beat those three teams, anyone in the league, to have to face that road. So whereas I think Miami is a huge threat to any one of these teams, I don't think Miami can go through all three that without a monumental upset where Philly loses the 8th seed, the Knicks or Atlanta, which I don't see. I think the road's too tough for Miami, but they could upset someone along the way.
Mark it down, boys and girls. Gregor says the Clippers are taking the trophy, and Kawhi is going to have his third trophy with his third different team. That'll wrap up this episode. Enjoy the playoffs, kids. And don't forget, Instagram and Twitter @HoopsBoysPod. Check out our YouTube channel, Hoops Boys Podcast, for full episodes and clips. Listen on all your audio streaming devices. And let's get ready for this play-in tournament. Last word, Greg.
Let's have fun. Enjoy the NBA. I think the Steph Curry LeBron matchup, even if you just watch one game the whole playoffs, is going to be fantastic. Great TV. Great way to start the tourney.
Book it. Hoops Boys Podcast. Join us next time.